is that there are two kinds of paths in Avodas Hashem, and express itself in two paths of the way people daven. One is that the davening is mitech simcha, and the other is that the davening comes and is through merirus. The person feels he's a sense of humility and a sense of being broken or bitter. And the difference between the two people are depending on what they're thinking about, being that the thoughts are what stimulates the emotion. So depending what you're thinking when you think about Hashem, that will determine what kind of emotion it will develop. So in the previous chapter 12, he went into at length and in depth, what is it that a person thinks about that'll stimulate feelings of simcha, excitement, and love for Hashem. And that's basically when you think about the greatness of Hashem, how amazing the whole idea of creation is, and how amazing the whole meaning of Yesh Me'ayin is. All these thoughts will bring out within a person to see more and more the greatness of Hashem, and we feel fortunate that we are connected to Him, and that brings a feeling of joy and simcha. In this chapter, he discusses the other kind of person, that he's focusing on yes, the greatness of Hashem, but thinking more in terms of where do I stand, and thinking about my davening, my learning, my mitzvahs, are they the way they're supposed to be? Now, when we began this chapter, he said, we're not talking about a person who is violating Torah. We're talking about a person who observes Torah, learns Torah, observes mitzvahs, but he's questioning himself and sort of introspective about how am I doing it? Am I doing it the way it should be? To give an example just from simple halacha, we're into Chumash Vayikra now, and Parshat Vayikra and Tzav, we learned about korbanos. There's one korban what's called Oila V'Yored, which is similar to, I guess in English you would say, it's a korban that it has a sliding scale, depending on how financially well off you are, that will determine what kind of korban you bring. If you're wealthy, then you bring an animal, which is for the cattle, you bring for an ox. If you don't have that much money, so you use something which is less expensive, like sheep. And if you don't even have that kind of money, then you bring something which is a mincha, which is basically wheat, which becomes flour, and you mix it with oil, and that's the other kind of korban. What's the halacha if somebody that's poor decides he's going to go out of his way and bring a korban that the rich bring? Is it acceptable or not? What would you think? What's about the reverse? If somebody was wealthy and he could afford easily a korban that's more expensive, and he decides to bring a korban mincha, which is less expensive. So the halach is, he's not yotze with his korban. He's not fulfilled his obligation, and he has to bring the proper korban. Which means I did something which is a korban, but not for me. According to my standards, it should have been more. And the same is with tzedakah, that if a person who gives, tzedakah, he'll give $1,000 a year tzedakah, for one person, this would be, wow, that's amazing. He gave $1,000. For another person, if he's a millionaire and he gives $1,000 for tzedakah, he gave tzedakah, you can't take that away, but he hasn't fulfilled the mitzvah properly. It's not 10%, it's definitely not 20%, and he's not even giving according to his standards. So the same thing also spiritually. I'm davening, I'm learning, I'm putting on tefillin, I'm eating matzah, I'm doing the mitzvah, but am I investing into it my entire self, the way it should be, or not? So the first example he gave was, let's say I do the mitzvah, but we're not thinking about the content of the mitzvah, the purpose of the mitzvah. Like tefillin. Tefillin is all about dedicating myself to Hashem and connecting myself to Hashem. Am I thinking about that when I put on the tefillin? Or I just put it on, I'm not sort of thinking about what's the purpose of a tefillin. or doing esrog and lulav, am I just doing the act and moving along, or am I thinking that this is all about unity and it's all about humility and so on and so forth? So if a person does mitzvahs, but they do it more out of rote, like it's a routine. I get up in the morning, I put on my tefillin, I daven, I do this and this. These kind of mitzvahs, you can't take away the fact that the mitzvah was observed, but this would be like a body without a soul, a guf without a neshama. So it's lacking. And that's the person, and even a person who has kavanah is asking himself, am I really investing myself completely according to my standards? Am I like this poor person, or rather rich person, who's bringing a carbon of a poor person? Okay, so we're on page 100, and we left off by the last two paragraphs on the bottom of page 100. So this is called doing a mitzvah, but not doing it the way it could be done, the way it should be done. But in particular, if a person meditates in his davening on the greatness of Hashem, and like we said yesterday, meditating on the greatness of Hashem doesn't mean just saying Hashem is great. It means thinking about it with a certain thought process based on what he learned about how to understand the greatness of Hashem. What does it mean that Hashem is infinite? What does it mean that he's unlimited? And he thinks about it in depth, and that's how he's davening. Considering what he understands now, how awesome Hashem is, how great Hashem is, how exalted and infinite he is, even if I would do my avodah properly, he thinks to himself, it's absolutely insignificant compared to Hashem. What I'm doing, even though I'm doing it right, and I'm sort of putting my thoughts into it, and I'm putting my heart into it, but if I'm thinking of who I'm serving, I say to myself, it doesn't do justice when you're thinking of who you're serving. It gives a mashal. Let me first say in advance what he's going to say, and then we'll read the words inside.
Which page?
Page 101. So basically, this question could be, you might remember we brought it up in the beginning of the year during Tishrei time, but there's a very famous question about vidui. Every one of us says Shamnu, Bagadnu, Gazalnu. If you pay attention to the words, it's pretty scary. I did this, I did that, I did the other thing. But the question is, tzaddikim, they say it also, they're davening. So could you imagine a tzaddik? Imagine someone like Moshe Rabbeinu, or Rabbi Akiva, or the Rebbe saying Hashamnu, Bagatnu, Gazalnu, but that's what they do. How does that make sense? How are they saying this?
Moshe Rabbeinu and Rabbi Akiva, the same davening that we davening today is the same davening before?
Yeah, I'm saying if they would be davening, Rabbi Akiva surely had the same davening that we have. Moshe Rabbeinu probably also had the same davening that we have. But I'm saying, yeah, but okay, I just said the name, Rambam, Rashi, tzaddikim, who are the greatest tzaddikim of all generations, and they daven and they said Hashamnu. I mean, how does it make sense that they should say such words? And the answer is that there's actually a chapter in Tanya where the Alter Rebbe talks about this. We find something similar with Yaakov Avinu. That when Yaakov Avinu heard that Esav was coming, he was overcome with fear. And the question is asked in Gemara, and Rashi brings the question as well, like, why was he afraid? Hashem promised him that he's going to protect him. Why was he overcome with fear? So Rashi answers, he thought, Shema Yigre Machet. Maybe because I sinned, therefore, my merit has been compromised as a result of my sin. And therefore, I don't deserve Hashem's protection. That was his fear. On the other hand, it's Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu is one of the others. Not only one of the others, but one of the most chosen of the others. And the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, they were like a Merkava. You remember what the word Merkava means, a chariot, means that every thought and every speech and every action, everything, even every nuance is connected to Hashem. There's nothing going on in their life that's not connected to Hashem. What do I mean by every nuance? Because they were so connected that every movement they made had something to do, and it was a reflection and was for a purpose of connecting to Hashem in one way or another. And therefore, it's hard to understand how was Yaakov worried that maybe he committed a sin and therefore he compromised his merits. Yaakov doesn't commit sins. So the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, it means that when one understands the greatness of Hashem, how Hashem is great, and Hashem is infinite, and so on and so forth, then they feel that the davening I'm doing, the love that I have, the feelings that I have, as amazing as it might sound and might feel, it's almost insignificant when you think of it that you're davening and feeling love towards Hashem, and Hashem is infinite, and you feel that my avodah is sort of insignificant if it's about Hashem. And not only that, it can be considered a sin, which means he gives a mashal. We'll soon see the words inside, that you're supposed to respect a king, and you're supposed to respect a minister. And when you're in front of a minister, you act in a certain way. When you act in front of a king, it warrants much more of a different level of respect. So if a person would be standing in front of a king, but he would respect him the way you respect a minister, not only that wouldn't be good enough, but that would actually be considered sort of violation of the king's respect, because you don't act that way in front of a king. But in front of the minister, it's good. But in front of the king, that's you need to act in a more respectful way. I mean, let's take it even ourselves when we daven. There's a difference between davening Baruch She'amar, Ashrei, or when we daven Shemona Esrei. In both cases, we're davening to Hashem. But the difference is Shemona Esrei is if you're standing in the king's chamber, right in front of the Melech, and here it's a different story. You're not allowed to interrupt. You're not allowed to look to the side. You're not allowed to look out of your siddur. You can't even interrupt for Kedusha, Baruch Hu, Amen, Amen Yeshmei Rabbah, because right now you're standing in front of the Melech himself. So that means that if I would be davening the first part of davening, and someone says Kedusha, and I answer Kaddish, 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 that's the right thing to do. If I wouldn't, I'd be violating halacha. If I'm in Shemona Esrei and I say Kaddish, 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 I say it, then I'm violating the halacha. Because in front of the Melech, it's a different level of respect. When I gave this class once, one of the students gave an interesting mashal, which I thought is actually appropriate. She said that today you can go to the store and buy disposable plates, forks, and spoons, which are absolutely amazing. They look mamish like china. Somebody would walk into the room, would see beautiful china on the table, beautiful forks and spoons and napkins and knives and everything. When you get closer, you can see what it is, or we know already. But let's say people of a different generation would see it, they would have no doubt in their mind that this is China. So you're making a Sheva Brachas for a friend, you're making a bris, and you do the best you can. You buy expensive, disposable dishes. It's amazing. What if you get a phone call that the president, but we'll use the Lashon, a king is coming to be in your home, and you have to prepare a meal for him, and you prepare disposable dishes. That would be disrespectful. King is coming, you prepare real china. But it was always so beautiful. Everybody actually was praising me, and they were so excited. Yeah, for a regular person, it's okay. For a melech, not only it's not okay, it's being disrespectful. That for a king, you didn't take out your china, you just put out disposable dishes. You can think, if anyone can think of another mashal, but the principle of the matter is something logical. So therefore, the same person who's serving the same Hashem, it can make a difference. The more I understand the Hashem's greatness, the more I feel not competent, the more I feel that it's not enough of what I'm doing to serve Hashem. This doesn't do justice to serving someone like Hashem. So if I understand Hashem's greatness to this degree, then I feel okay with what I'm doing. If I understand Hashem's greatness in a greater level, then I feel that way. Yaakov Avinu, dafka because he was Yaakov. And Dafka, because he understood Hashem's greatness a way like no one else would understand, therefore he felt that my Aveda is like a sin. That's what he meant. Not Chas v'Shalom, that he's not that he violated something and he did a sin. It means my davening, my learning, my love for Hashem, thinking of who Hashem is, compared to that, this is considered inappropriate, not enough. Even though if that's the case, it'll never end. So he says that's true, but nevertheless, a person on that level, when he thinks about it, feels like, I'm really not serving Hashem properly, because he understands the greatness of Hashem at a whole different level. Okay, let's see the words in the start, and we'll see a little bit more details. You might remember it's also based on a story with someone who was called Reb Sadia Goyen. Reb Sadia Goyen was one of the greatest leaders. First of all, in his generation, he was the greatest leader, and he was in the era called Goenim. The era of Goenim was for about 500 years after the Gemara was completed. There was about 500 years where the leaders of Jewry were called Goenim. And after that comes the era where they're called Rishonim, and after that came the era where they're called Achreinim. So he was in the era of the Goinim, and at that time he was the leader of Jewry. And he came to, he was traveling somewhere, so he stayed in an inn. Remember the story? And in this inn, the innkeeper had no idea who this is because there were no pictures in those days. But after being there for a few days, apparently someone found out that he's there, and a crowd of a few hundred people came and gathered to greet him. The innkeeper walks out as usual, and he's shocked to see a few hundred people standing outside and said, "What's everybody doing here?" "You don't know? Reb Sadia Goyen is the guest in your place." And he was shocked, couldn't believe it. When he walked out to greet the people, he burst out crying. He fell to his feet. He begged him for forgiveness. And he said to him, "Why are you begging for forgiveness? You gave me breakfast, you gave me lunch, you gave me supper, you gave me linen, you gave me towels, you gave me everything I need. Why? What forgiveness for what?" And he's crying and he said, "But if I would have known that it was you, I would have done it totally on a different level." So when we asked Reb Sadia Goyen this question, why is he saying Oshamnu? He told him this story. And he said, every day I understand Hashem in a way which I never understood before. Now that I understand Hashem this way, I feel Hashem that I am not serving Hashem properly. My avodah is inadequate. I guess that's the word to use. It's not enough. So let's see the words inside. So he's saying even a person that serves Hashem. So it's not that he's thinking I didn't do enough. He did enough, but still when he thinks of the greatness of Hashem, it makes him feel that what he did is not enough. Not only not enough, it's almost like a chet. So at the third line, third paragraph, we're looking, everything's under the line. We're doing the Hebrew-English part. For example, Melech Gadol v'Neira, a great and awesome king. I guess you can have a king over 100,000 people, and you have a king over 1 million people, and you can have a person who's a king over 200, 500 million people. The more the nation, the greater the nation, the greater the king. He's more powerful, he's more influential. So you have a king who's a Melech Gadol v'Neira, a great and awesome king. And if a person serves him, but not in a way which is befitting his stature, that's considered demeaning to him because you're not serving him on the level that it should be. Every type of service has to be appropriate according to the level of the one that you're serving. You can't compare the way you serve an ordinary person, or the way you serve a king. Or like we said before, the way you would even serve a minister compared to the way you would serve a king. If he would serve a king, then a person is in a Chabad house, he respects his Chabad rabbi, he'll walk in, shake his hand, he might have a conversation, give him a slap on the back, he's all excited, but a person will talk like that to the Rebbe, that would be disrespectful. Same act. Over here, it's appreciated. It's a sign of respect, love. With someone like the Rebbe, this would be disrespectful. This analogy would help us understand the same with our relationship with Hashem. Saying so, considering how awesome and how greatness and the exaltedness of Hashem, who is infinite, considering that, page 102, that is utterly no limit to Hashem, and we can't understand. He's unfathomable. So when you think of Hashem, and the more you understand that greatness, even the Aveda of the greatest tzaddikim, like Yaakov Avinu, it still is not comparable and still not appropriate in proportion to the greatness of Hashem. And this is why everyone says Ashamnu in Aseres Meitshuva. And here it says, like I told you, Gam Tzadik Gomer K'ma Moshe Rabbeinu Olav Hashalom. When it came to Aseres Meitshuva, even Moshe Rabbeinu also did Tshuva, and he also said Vidui. So he probably also said the same text, Ashamnu B'Gad Nagazalmu. Because in light of Hashem's true greatness, Hashem's true exaltedness, Gam Aveda Mitzvah, even true Aveda. True Aveda means not like we said before, I'm davening, but I'm not putting my heart and soul into it. No, it's with my davening, with my mouth and my heart and soul, and I feel, and this person's experiencing love for Hashem, feeling awe for Hashem, but he feels the love and awe that I'm feeling in comparison to who I'm feeling it towards is not inadequate. So even true Avodah, not only it's not enough, it would be considered like a chet. Like, is that how you serve Hashem? Of course, this person is, demanding much of himself. We'll still see what he says about that. There's a pasuk where it says that Moshe Rabbeinu felt like he sort of fell to the ground and he bowed down to prostrate himself before Hashem. So the Gemara says, what caused him to do that? Midas emes ra. He saw the attribute of emes. So who could stand before Hashem's great truth? In other words, the fact that he bowed down meant that when he recognized the emes and the greatness of Hashem, that caused him to feel so humble that he bowed down to Hashem. Again, you might remember the story because I think I probably told you more than once, so this will be number 3 or 2, about a chassid who came to the Alter Rebbe, and he said to the Alter Rebbe that I feel that my davening and my learning is not the emes. I'm not doing it with my complete, total heart into it. We're not doing it complete with the purest of intentions. Then he said to the Alter Rebbe, and I feel that even the fact that I'm complaining now, that I'm not doing it be'emes, even that complaint is not really be'emes. I'm not doing it with the purest of intentions. And even the complaint that my complaint about complaining is not be'emes, even that's not be'emes. And then he went on, and even the complaint about the complaint of the complaint, even he was going deeper and deeper into himself, that I'm not really doing with the purest of intentions. And after a while, he fainted in the Alter Rebbe's room. When the Frierdiker Rebbe told the story, he said, and that was be'emes. He was out cold, he was unconscious. Which means the chassid was demanding of himself, thinking that it's not sort of, not emes of me is not the purest and deepest feeling the way it should be towards Hashem. This is explained in other Maimarim at length, and specifically he mentions a Maimar, the Yom HaShmini, where he explains this at length. Okay, our Parsha, Yom HaShmini. So then there's the question which we just asked, wait a second, so how's anybody able to survive? Like if a person is a tzaddik and he's serving Hashem properly, and he can't even say to himself, I'm not serving Hashem according to my standards, I am, and still feel broken? So that's the next piece. Nevertheless, Hashem does not demand of a person more than what he could possibly do. In the Amr Azal, there's a famous saying of the sages, the Medrash, al pasuk shor a kesef, on that pasuk, to bring the carbon of an ox or bring the carbon of a sheep. And it says, Hashem is not like a human king. Page 104. Basically, the full text of that Gemara is, or is it a Medrash? It's a Medrash. The full text of that Medrash is that a king of flesh, when he demands things of people, he demands things of them according to his capacity. In other words, he's not realistic. He's a king. He has all the resources. He has all the opportunities. So he can do certain things. If he demands of other people that kind of perfection, it's wrong. When it comes to rewarding them, he doesn't reward them according to his capacity, of his greatness. He rewards them as he would reward people. Hashem is the opposite. When it comes to demand things of us, he demands only according to our, even though Hashem is infinite, nevertheless, he knows every single person's limitations, every single person's weaknesses, and he demands things of us, only things that are possible according to our capacity. When he rewards us according to his capacity. And that's what it says there in the Medrash. But when he asks of us to do things, it's only according to our potential. Because if we would consider the true greatness of Hashem, it's impossible for anybody to be serving Hashem, any human being of flesh and blood, to serve Hashem in a way that would be, it would be adequate, it would be appropriate. So when Hashem says to us that I want you to serve me and to serve me be'emes, it means every person according to their degree of emes, of what I can accomplish. So really, this person is not doing anything wrong. He's doing the best he can. He's a tzaddik. He can even be one of the greatest tzaddikim. But nevertheless, it says, even though we're not saying he's doing something wrong, because Hashem knows every person where they stand, and knows their limitations. But at certain times, when a person thinks about it, it makes him feel bitter. It feels like I'm not serving Hashem properly. And of course, it's Kolshken Kishim is Beinin, but that's at the next level. No, let's say Kolshke, but certainly a person who's not on the level of this big tzaddik, and he thinks about his avodah, that I'm not serving Hashem according to my standards of emes. My serving Hashem is not with the purest of attention. So, for example, a person is davening and learning, but he's thinking about the rewards. By me doing this and this, have certain rewards, even in the physical world. Hashem will give me brachas. It's a beautiful thought, and he's supposed to think that. But that's not the purest of intention. And if a person is not thinking about the physical brachas, he's thinking about he'll get brachas and have reward in the world to come, spiritual reward, but he's still thinking about the reward, about the pleasure that he's going to have, the reward. And the way it's supposed to be is just the purest of intentions. I'm just embracing Hashem because he's Hashem, and I love him because I love him. So therefore, what he's saying is, certainly if my intentions are not the purest, I do things so people should honor me. I do things so I should have other benefits for ulterior motives. It's not the West it could be. Surely this person will feel that sense of humility and that sense of bitterness. And again, to reemphasize what we said yesterday, that bitterness, the word merirus, in this context doesn't mean chas v'sholom sadness, doesn't mean depression. On the contrary, this we said yesterday that depression means a feeling that is empty of life, it's void of life. It's a feeling that I feel, and that's why people who are that way, what do they want to do? They want to sleep. They want to be inactive. They don't want to go places, they want to do things. Even a friend will come knock on the door, come, we're going out somewhere. You're so snug in your down feeling that you just don't want to do anything. That's depression. And that's something which in Hasidus is considered the threshold of all evil. When you have to do everything in the world to avoid going there. On the other hand, bitterness is a feeling that's charged up with a lot of life. And basically, I'm charged up with chayas to do something about the situation. And I want to do something. It's just that the driving force, what's the driving force that gets me to do it? Because I understand how if I don't take care of it, how negative it is and how destructive it is. Like I gave the example yesterday, a person who is running away from fire. He's running towards life, which is a good thing. But his running is with so much more intensity, but he's running and he's full of life. He's not just sitting back and surrendering to the situation. So the same thing as Baruchnis, when I feel that something's lacking, something missing, then he's full of life to do something about it, and that's a positive thing. As long as we don't get stuck on that. There's an example given in the Sikha from the Frierdiker, a letter from the Frierdiker Rebbe, that even though we say that feeling bitter about something is positive, and he compares it to antibiotic. Is antibiotic good or is it bad? It's a good thing. It saves people's lives. But antibiotic we drink in teaspoons. How about water or juice? We can drink a whole cup. You do not drink a cup of antibiotic. That's dangerous. And the reason is because antibiotic, in essence, it's destroying something. It's destroying the bacteria, it's destroying the germ, and therefore you have to be very cautious that it only destroys the unhealthy things and not touch on the healthy things. This is one of the biggest issues with certain medications like chemo, where it's very powerful and really gets rid of whatever the problem is, Rahman al-Islam, but it also does a lot of damage to the healthy tissue. One of the things that I think is very new in medicine is where they have, just like they have, but that's one of the things that are brought out, where it says that swords will be turned into plowshares, which means tools that are being used for destruction will be used for positive purposes, that they use the same technology that they use in war for the smart bombs. What's a smart bomb? That it is directed and guided to only attack the enemy, not everything else around it. That's a certain technology they have now with medicine, that it should only destroy the unhealthy part of the body, the unhealthy cell, and not the healthy part. So Marirus is something good as long as it's done in a measured way, in a monitored way, in a way that you're not overdoing it, then it'll bring out good and not bad. If a person goes into this Marirus and thinks about this all day, Chas v'shalom, that'll lead to depression, and that'll lead to feeling low self-esteem and all the wonderful things that don't let a person accomplish in life. I once heard someone say that he hates, like their religion, because all it does makes you feel guilty. So is feeling guilty a good thing or is it a bad thing? And the answer is both. In essence, it's actually a good thing to feel guilty if there's something wrong. When is it bad if I take it, if I overdo it? If I'm obsessed with guilt, then it's bad. To use an example, I once heard from a doctor that one of the greatest gifts Hashem gave a person is to feel pain when something's wrong in the body. Why is that a gift? Wouldn't it be better without pain? But no, because the pain is like an alarm that alerts me that there's something wrong. Then the person goes to the doctor and he does his exam and he finds what it is and he corrects it and he go on with life. If chas v'shalom, there was no pain, you don't feel uncomfortable, nothing, even though there's a something there in the body that's dangerous, it basically keeps growing, and unfortunately, it comes to a point where when you finally discover it, there's nothing you can do about it. So the fact that I'm aware of something that's wrong and I feel pain is a good thing. I can take care of it. Same thing spiritually. If a person is acting in a way which is immoral, acting in a way which is spiritually destructive, and they don't feel any guilt, I don't want to feel guilty, then it's not going to change. And Rahman al-Islam will get to a point where it'll be totally out of control. You won't be able to do anything about it. So feeling guilty in itself is good because it alerts me to make change. It alerts me to improve things. But when a person obsesses with it and doesn't allow themselves to just dismiss, now go on and do what you need to do. Don't think about things that make you feel guilty. then it's not a negative, it's a positive. So therefore, this bitterness again is in davening. It's not a whole day, and even in davening, it's all about the thoughts are all about thinking of doing what I can do in order to improve it, in order to grow. So first, they gave an example of a person that davens and learns, but is not putting his whole heart and soul into it. Then he gave an example of a person that puts his whole heart and soul into it, but still feels that way because it's inadequate when you think of serving Hashem. And now on page 105, he says, the Koshkin, how much more so does this all apply when it's a person who's on a level that is actually not only that he's we're not talking about a person who's on the level described before, but he actually has thoughts in his mind during davening that are disturbing the davening. Or especially if he speaks or he acts in a way, which is not the way Hashem wants, it's not directed towards Hashem. By doing that, misrachik, that's really violating something in Torah. That's distancing yourself. You're creating a gap between yourself and Hashem. Mikol zeh, when he thinks about it, mismarma b'nafshe b'oid, he feels very embittered in his soul. It affects him emotionally to the point that he's crying. I'm crying about eitzim rechukai, but the end goal is that this should motivate me and this should give me the drive to do everything to change. So here's the second type of chassid, Aveda b'shiflus, an Aveda which involves and have feelings of humility, he feels embittered, and this comes from his burniness from meditating on Richukai, how far he is from Hashem and how he's serving Hashem, especially when he thinks about Erech HaNevet. So basically, the more I think about the greatness of Hashem, the more I will experience that feeling of it's inadequate to serve Hashem in this way. I'm not really doing justice to my service of Hashem. So reading these two chapters, it seems to be totally disconnected from everything before in the Maimon. But in the next ice, he's going to explain why he brought this in, to show that even these two people that are davening on such a high level, nevertheless, they might also have this yeshua that he was talking about, which could actually lead to sinas china. Okay, to be continued. So today, Mrs. Nemini is going to be teaching the Mashiach class. That'll be at 10:30, right? You got the message about that? No. That was halacha. Rabbi Ozdeba should be coming, and then will be. Yeah.